Hello and welcome to Indiana Family Forum. Indiana Family Forum is brought to you by the American Family Association of Indiana. I'm Jeff Howe, Director of Communications with the American Family Association, along with Micah Clark, and we have our special guest for today, David Smith. He is with our sister organization in Illinois. So, David, I'm going to let you introduce what you do in Illinois and a little bit about the organizations that you represent.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff and Micah. I really appreciate you guys asking me to come on and discuss the differences between the two states here. And there are significant. By the way, you guys are gaining some Illinoisans. By the way, I don't know if you know that, but they're leaving the People's Republic of Illinois for greener pastures, or I should say freedom. But Illinois Family Institute was established back in 1992 to actually bring our mission statement is to bring a biblical perspective to public policy in Illinois, and we do that on two fronts. One in the General Assembly in the Springfield, in our state capital, dealing with our lawmakers on the issues of moral concern, pro-life, marriage, family, all those things, religious liberty, parental rights. And Unfortunately, they have a super duper majority of wokesters in Springfield, and so they can steamroll us. But we're trying to keep the moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats honest. We're trying. But the second front of the battle is to educate the body of Christ throughout the state of Illinois on those same issues, whatever issues are current in the culture that are deceiving many of us. And so we're trying to educate, and the worldview in the pews needs help. Let me put it that way.
Well, David, I'm so glad to have you on today. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on was during our legislative session, we have a part-time legislature. I think you have a full-time, don't you?
No, it's considered part time,
Okay.
but
It feels like full-time.
yeah, it does. Well, between January and May 31st
Okay.
is the session, and then they adjourn by. They're supposed to have the budget done by May 31st,
Okay.
and then they
Ours will
adjourn
typically.
until the fall for a veto session, which is generally 6 days in the fall.
Okay. Okay. Well, we have one that goes usually till February or March in election years, and then April in long budget years like we just had. But during the session, I got your emails from you and from Lori and from other staff members. I was stunned at the issues that we were dealing with in Indiana to um, ban transgender surgeries, which we passed, to prohibit discussion of sexual activity in schools K through 3, which we passed. We passed a bill to protect speech for pastors and counseling. And then I see what's happening in Illinois, and it's like an alternate universe. And Hoosiers and people from Illinois in the southern part of Illinois are very similar, but man, the stuff you deal with, I just wanted our people in Indiana to see, because 10 years from now, it's very possible we're dealing with a lot of the same battles you're dealing with. We could, as the culture erodes.
Absolutely.
So, so I want you to just walk through some of the battles you've been having and currently are in, and I think it's going to shock some Hoosiers. With, for example, you have a bill on crisis pregnancy centers that is horrendous. But maybe start there. Tell us about that bill.
Yeah. So Senate Bill 3909. I'm sorry, 3093. Get my numbers mixed up here. This bill has passed the House and the Senate, and so it's on its way to our woke governor, who is probably going to sign it. And This gives the authority to the Attorney General to investigate crisis pregnancy centers if there is a complaint of deceptive practices. Now, the Attorney General does a lot of deceptive practices regarding businesses, because it's fraudulent. But now they're going to apply it to crisis pregnancy centers. So if crisis pregnancy centers are telling women the wrong thing, I'm using my scare quotes, then they're going to be finable up to $50,000 in incidents. Okay. And this extends not only to the crisis pregnancy center, but it extends also to the sidewalk counselors. So those good Christian men and women who are out in front of abortuaries trying to get turnarounds, all right, or even those inside crisis pregnancy centers dealing with a woman who is, trying to decide what is the best choice for her. If they dare tell her, think about this now. as a Christian, life begins at conception. Is that false information, Micah? Not for us, but for liberals, for wokesters, right? And then I also want you to think about the harassing aspect of this too. We know our friend Jack Phillips from Colorado, the baker. They targeted him. They targeted him with a gay cake, and after the Supreme Court ruled in his favor, they came back with transgender cake, right? You want to talk about harassing someone? Think about how our woke liberal activists who want to tear things down, BLM, Antifa, whatever, how they can use this law to harass Crisis Pregnancy Center and the staff. They said this, they said that, it's really, and of course, Micah, crisis pregnancy centers operate on a shoestring budget. They depend on volunteers and donations, and one or two $50,000 fines could mean the end of the ministry. It's horrific. Now, the good news is, Peter Breen from the Thomas More Society testified for us in Springfield and really set it up for litigation later. So he's an attorney. They're a pro-life, pro-religious liberty organization based in Chicago, and they're ready to sue once this law's in, to put an injunction in to stop it. Every reasonable person will look at the First Amendment and say, you can't restrict speech just because you disagree with it, and you can't fine it. And hopefully, the judges will agree. But this is the tyranny of the left. They don't agree with us. They're going to label it deceptive, hateful, dangerous, and then they'll want to shut us down.
Yep. David, I was on a fishing trip a couple months ago. I came in Missouri and I came back through St. Louis into Illinois. As soon as I crossed the border, you know what I'm going to say? There were billboards advertising abortion where in Illinois where it's safe and quote unquote legal, and we're also hearing stories of plans to build abortion clinics along the Indiana border. How strong is the pro-life movement in Illinois, and is it really going to become the abortion stop for the Midwest?
It's already. It's horrific. I went down to Carbondale, Illinois, which is where Southern Illinois University is, to show a movie called The Matter of Life, which is a pro-life documentary. I highly recommend it. Stream it on Netflix or Amazon Prime. It's a very powerful movie. So we showed that movie to the Christians at a church there. But the pastor told me, and I was under the impression that 2 new abortuaries had opened up in Carbondale since Roe v. Wade was taken down. And he said, no, Dave, there's 6. This is a college town. But more than that, guys, think about this. They're putting people on trains from Kentucky and from Memphis, Tennessee, shooting them up to Carbondale to get their abortions. And that's what's happening. You talked about coming through St. Louis. There's a town called Fairview Heights that has an abortuary now. And that's 13 miles away from St. Louis. So Missouri has restrictions. Illinois doesn't. Come on over, get your abortions. And but let me tell you the good news, though. You asked how strong is the pro-life movement. Well, we've got to get stronger. But the good folks in Danville, Illinois, which is on the border with Indiana, just passed an ordinance making them the first sanctuary city for the unborn in Illinois. So they're saying no abortuaries in Danville. And there was one in the works. So that's now in court. But hey, the local people should, the principle of the lower magistrate, right, says the lower people, the government closest to the people should be able to have the final say on whether or not they're going to be an abortion destination or not.
This actually brings up something, David, that I think is a misconception for a lot of people, that the entire state of Illinois is this liberal. and this
No.
left. And tell us a little bit about how the makeup of the state is, and how a lot of these people are being held captive by a small
Yeah.
geographic area of your state.
So yeah, the northeast corner of the state is Chicago and Cook County. About 3 million people there in a state of 12 million people. And they have a disproportionate impact on the rest of the state, and especially in our state laws. Of course, that has grown actually into the suburbs now, and so the whole collar counties around Cook County, around Chicago, have become blue. And so I would say that 8 million people area is now dominated by Democrats, by wokesters, but the downstate folks, I would say south of I-80, if anybody knows where I-80 is, kind of south of I-80, it's really a different state. And then once you get past I-72, it becomes a Bible Belt area. I mean, I kid you not. I don't know if Indiana has a Bible Belt, but we have a Bible Belt in southern Illinois. And the problem is, in our last election, we had a wonderful candidate running for governor. Good Christian man, a farmer from Xena, Illinois, which is, almost southern Illinois, but it's central Illinois. And God-fearing man, his wife on fire for the Lord. But the downstate turnout for the election was only like 40 to 50%. And if we have a hope of challenging the vote in Chicagoland, it needs to be 80 or 90% turnout. And so, what I fear is a lot of our folks are either disengaged or just discouraged. Yeah. They think they can't, well, why does my vote matter, type of thing. And we can't fall into that kind of thinking. We just can't.
David, do you have in Illinois, in Indiana, we have a lot of, before we passed our summer session bill to ban abortion, we had, and still have on the books, things like health inspections of abortion clinics.
Oh, there's none there. No, we have
none.
Actually, over the last 2 years, the abortion lobby has worked to dismantle all the regulations we had on abortion, including parental notice of abortion. All right. Now, this polls at 70% in Illinois. 70% of the voters or more, maybe it was 72, I can't remember exactly, but we'll just say 70 to be conservative. 70% of the voters said that they favor parental notice of abortion if a minor child was to go get an abortion. The liberals couldn't tolerate that. They had to dismantle that. So now a 13-year-old can go and get an abortion without mom and dad, grandma, grandpa ever knowing about it. And it's horrific. Now, I want to point to you, today on Live Action, which is a great pro-life website, they highlight a story, Granite City, Illinois, where there's Hope Abortion Clinic. 13-year-old girl was rushed away in an ambulance, damaged by an abortion procedure. Could you imagine a 13-year-old?
No.
I wonder if mom and dad even know.
Right. Well, we certainly need to pray for Senate Bill 3093 and the governor's actions and the legal actions that follow. So please pray for that. And I want to say, too, if there's anybody watching in Indiana who has family in Illinois, please tell them about the Illinois Family Institute. You guys are rock stars. The work you do is an inspiration for us. We always look to you as what we'd like to be someday. You're a great organization. But let me ask you about something.
Your job is to keep Indiana red.
Yeah, we're working on that. Let me ask you about something that goes back a few years, but it's an issue here in Indiana, and it's kind of controversial. I think there's some misguided conservatives. But what has the legalization of marijuana done in Illinois? I just read a story the other day about fentanyl showing up in marijuana in Illinois. So, you fought that battle too. We're fighting it here. Tell us about that.
Oh man, this is really hits my heart hard. I've got young people in my home, 4 of whom are now driving. Lord help us. But that's my fear. Our roads are going to be filled with people who are inebriated, who are not sober, and who have delayed judgment or corrupt judgment. And it puts all of us at risk. on the roads here. But even more than that, you mentioned the CDC just reported that fentanyl-laced marijuana is on the rise and has killed people. And just a little fentanyl is all it takes to be deadly, mortal.
Yeah.
So let me just back up. We have dispensaries open up all over the place now, and it's really hard. I even testified in my own little township, and asked the mayor and the village trustees. I said, "Look, guys, the high school is right down the street here. What message are you sending if you say it's okay to open a dispensary? What is the message you're saying to those kids?" And Micah, Jeff, you're old enough to remember the 80s. In the 80s, we had a wonderful campaign, public service announcements, right? Say no to drugs.
Yes.
And everybody remembers the frying pan with the egg going into the frying pan saying, "This is your brain, the egg, and this is your brain on drugs." And they put it into a hot frying pan and it sizzles. In other words, your brain is getting fried on drugs, right?
Yep. Yep.
So the perception of risk was really high in the 80s, and the use was really low.
Right.
Now we flip the script. Now government is actually promoting this because, hey, it's a good tax revenue. It's a good source of revenue. It's harmless. Anyway, I'll talk about that in a second. But here we flip the script, and now perception of risk is low. Use is skyrocketing.
Yep.
Skyrocketing. And it is not harmless. One study just recently came out and said 30% of men who use this high potency THC, I'll get to that in a moment too, is causing schizophrenia.
Yes, I was just going to mention that 25% of all new schizophrenia diagnoses they can now attribute to marijuana use.
Well, and so we have to wonder, some of these shooting events, what was the drug usage, Anyway, and let me just talk about the THC too, since you guys are you grew up in the 80s as well. This is not Cheech and Chong's marijuana. It's not 2%, 3% THC. Right. We're talking 20% or more. And there's actually products out there that are now high concentrate, 99% THC, called wax, shatter, and dab. These are concentrates that they put into a vape pen and use, and there's no smell to it. I don't know if you knew this, guys. So a kid can do this in a classroom, in the hallways, and never be caught and get stoned out of their minds. Now, let me just talk real quick, too, about those who would say, "Oh, come on, Dave, it's not unlike alcohol, and prohibition didn't work," right? It's so, come on, stop it, right? Listen, one can have a beer or a glass of wine and not get intoxicated. One cannot take today's high marijuana, even one little toke, and not get intoxicated. Also, alcohol is generally out of your system within 24 hours, in and out. Marijuana can be there for days. They've done studies. 72 hours, your fine motor skills, 72 hours after using the marijuana, your fine motor skills are still impacted. They're not back to normal. And think about the person who comes home, even on a holiday weekend, and says, "Oh, I deserve to unwind," and smokes up. Guess what? They go back to work on Tuesday. There's a chance that their motor skills are still impaired. What does that mean on our roads? What does it mean in our workplaces?
Right.
What does it mean for the guy who's operating the forklift or the backhoe?
I just saw a study this last week of it was massive. It was like 10.6 million workplace drug tests, and what they found was that post-accident workplace drug tests are for marijuana use are at an all-time high, where people have harmed somebody, had an accident at work, and they found out they were high on marijuana. Just like you said, maybe they did it over the weekend, and then they come. And I've even read stories in Colorado where it's hard for construction companies to get people to pass their drug test to work because the construction companies are a huge risk if they hire someone who uses drugs and then the building's not built right or somebody's hurt. It's a liability lawsuit waiting to happen, and they're actually marketing to hire people outside of Colorado because they can't find enough people to pass the drug tests.
Well, this is it, and it's not limited just to the construction, but I'm understanding that over the road drivers, they can't find people to drive because they can't pass the drug test. I have a friend who works for a train company. They can't find engineers or conductors because they can't pass. And you know what? It gets even worse than this, guys. I have a friend who lives and works ministry, an ex-gay in the city of Chicago. She's an ex-gay, and she's out and proud and, out and very vocal about it. And she's had a lot of death threats. She wanted to hire a security team. None of them who applied could pass the drug test. This is in a church.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is the problem. And I'll point people to 1 Peter, I think it's 5:8, that says, be sober, be alert, because your adversary, the devil, is roaming around looking whom to devour. Guess what? If you're using marijuana, you're not sober, you're not alert, and you're vulnerable to the devil's schemes.
Yeah. And
I think it's
one
a
of the
real
other
Pandora's
things,
box.
yeah,
It
one
is
thing,
horrible.
another thing is, the myth of that it's a great, because it's sold as a great thing for taxes. But now we're finding out, I just read an article, I think this morning, about how Colorado's whole tax structure is collapsing because the marijuana isn't bringing in the revenue that they thought projected.
Well, you know what they've done is, think about this for a second. The black market is still thriving in Colorado, here in Illinois. Guess what? The gangs in Chicago still selling it. You know why? They don't pay the overhead. They don't pay the workman comp. They don't pay the taxes. And guess what? They can sell it a whole lot cheaper than the little boutique store on Main Street.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's
legalization created a whole new client base for the black market.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I have a friend who's in California who actually told me probably 2 years ago. I asked him about the effects of it, and he said, "Oh, nothing's changed." He goes, "The legal stuff isn't sold. Everybody buys the illegal stuff because nobody's pulling anybody over because they think they're buying the legal stuff."
That's right. That's right. In fact, there's a bill pending in Springfield, speaking of the differences, who says that our law enforcement officials can no longer pull somebody over for the stuff hanging from their mirror. So they used to be able to pull somebody over because it's illegal to have, like, the fuzzy dice or an air freshener hanging from your rearview mirror. And that would give them, a chance to make sure that, the person's sober or what have you, doesn't have a warrant. But now they're, the justice warriors are saying, no, you can't pull them over for that reason. So
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of our interview with David Smith, Executive Director of Illinois Family Institute. If you'd like to contact David or find out more about the Illinois Family Institute, we'll have some information down in our description. Part 2 of this interview will be next Friday. Have a great weekend. We look forward to seeing you next week on Indiana Family Forum.